Okay, hi everyone. How are you? See, Mary's like, do I look at the camera? Do I look at you? I'm like, don't worry. Everybody asks me all these questions. MF's TransCanada Nissan Drive-By. You're in the Pathfinder. Mary Orpen. Have I said your last name right?
Right.
Are you okay? Are you warm enough? Cold enough? Do you want me to adjust anything?
I'm totally fine.
Michelle, why do you sing and dance in your Pathfinder when you talk about such heavy subjects? Because music makes everything better. That's why. This is where the Peterborough Butterfly Run is going to happen.
That's right.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the run, but really what we're here to do is to promote awareness and to talk about why the run was even created. And actually, I'm going to hear Mary's story at the same time you are for the first time. I don't know Mary's story. I was put in touch with Mary through the family health team and Partners in Pregnancy Clinic because they're a silent partner in terms of where the money raised from this run goes.
That's right.
So they said, this is the girl you want to interview. This is the girl you want to talk to. So, Mary, we're going to start, and it's a delicate topic, but an important one because there's a lot of women and families who've experienced what you have, which is loss of a child.
Yeah, pregnancy loss, yes.
Pregnancy loss.
Mm-hmm.
A very interesting distinction because pregnancy loss versus child loss. Is there a distinction there?
I think our society thinks about it very differently, and there is a distinction. With a pregnancy loss, there's so few memories that you've had the chance to build. So you're kind of grieving what could have been, what wasn't. You don't have a lot of tangible memories to recall the person that you've lost.
Tell us about your loss.
So it was a while ago, 2008, and getting pregnant wasn't very easy for me. It took quite a while, and we had gone down the road of trying to identify what the problem was, but then I found myself pregnant before anything invasive happened, which was really great. And at my 12-week ultrasound, I went and found that there was no heartbeat and that the baby had actually died at only 7 weeks. So I was still feeling pregnant, still dreaming for those full 12 weeks about the child that I was waiting for.
Did you tell anyone you were pregnant?
Yes, so my partner at the time, obviously, and some close friends, but I hadn't told my family. Yeah.
It's such a wild conversation because I never experienced a miscarriage, and for some wild reason I always thought I would. My mom had a couple, my sister had one, and I just always assumed I was going to have a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first got pregnant with my first, and it was like, you know, it's amazing, right? When you're planning on having a baby and it's expected and all of those things, and it's like, oh my gosh. But I was terrified of losing the baby, and I never did. But I always have had a overwhelming compassion, obviously, for women who have, but also I wonder if there's, I guess what I'm getting at is, how do we decide when to tell people we're pregnant in the event that we do? You know, that old...
I think it's a really personal choice.
Yeah.
So there is, in our society, we often wait 12 weeks, wait for that first ultrasound. For someone who's had a loss, it's often, they don't feel safe until they've surpassed that point when the loss happened. It's really personal. So in my situation, I was faced with telling my parents that I was pregnant and that the baby had died all in the same breath, which was pretty horrible. They missed out on being excited, and they didn't get that. They just got to be really sad. So it's a really personal choice.
The Butterfly Run was created for 3 things. Can you tell people what they were?
Yeah, so the Butterfly Run includes those who are struggling to conceive, people who have experienced a pregnancy loss, or the death of a child. And there's no cutoff on that. You could be 100 and your child could be 80. And that's a special kind of loss. Yeah, we're not really limiting it. You can define that how you would take it, but the death of a child is probably different than the death of another person.
Oh, I would think so.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about why you wanted to create a run or awareness, and sort of the struggles you had yourself in managing these feelings. Like, were you prepared for a miscarriage? Was that ever in your mind?
So I don't think it was that in my mind that was going to happen to me. I was really worried that maybe, like you said, that you were always afraid you were going to have a miscarriage.
Yeah.
I was always afraid maybe I wasn't going to be able to conceive.
I was
in
worried
my
about
brain.
that too.
That was really on my mind. I knew lots of people that were struggling to conceive, and I knew lots of people with pregnancy losses. My own grandmother had 2 stillbirths, and an adopted child of hers died as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
So those kind of thoughts were in my head. I wasn't completely naive, but it just felt really unfair after struggling to conceive for the baby to not survive. And then it kind of spirals out of control. You feel like, is this ever going to happen to me? I can't just will it to happen. I can't just make it happen. It's something completely out of my control. I think the feelings, there's not a lot of rituals in our society. There's not a lot of people don't know what to do or what to say. So if someone has a miscarriage, what do? Right? You can make them a meal, you can send them a card, you can send them flowers, you can talk to them about it. But we don't have any really defined hard rituals, and one of the problems is we don't talk about it. It's quite quiet. It's getting a lot better, but one of the main things about the run is that we wanted to increase awareness and break the silence, start the conversation, and make it not so taboo so that people do have more support.
I always go back to a beautiful quote that Scott Davidson shared with me as a funeral director in Lakefield at Hendren Funeral Home, and grief shared is grief diminished, right? Mm-hmm. So when we sort of share our experiences, right? I mean, you and I can't completely empathize with you. I can have so much compassion for you, but I can't completely empathize with you because I haven't experienced the same loss you have. Mm-hmm. But another woman who has can, and that's really powerful. Right?
It is, yeah.
So I'd love to know, there's so many people right now that are actually struggling that I know of personally with fertility and having a baby, and going back to what you said about our society, and they don't know what to say and they don't know how to say it. People don't intend to be mean, and they don't intend to rub it in your face that, you know, I had 3 healthy babies and getting pregnant was no problem for me, and you know, like I don't want to feel guilt in that, but I also want to be mindful of other women's feelings who haven't had such fortunate experiences I have. So what kinds of things were helpful for you?
Surviving the awkwardness. So it can be really awkward and you can say the wrong thing, but trust your friend that they're strong enough to realize that your intention was good and maybe it just came out wrong. So I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of people talk about how friends disappear. They just disappear either because you're too stuck in your grief or they can't survive the awkwardness. So just listen, ask your friend how they can help. If they don't answer, make up ways to help. Not invasively, but sometimes it's too hard to ask. You're just too deep in it. So cleaning the house or doing some dishes or something. You really do have to follow the person's lead because everyone is so different and their experience is unique. But that's the biggest thing, I think, is just outlasting the awkwardness and keep the conversation going.
Yeah. How did you manage? How were you?
I'm usually a pretty upbeat, outgoing person, and I play a lot of recreational sports, and I think I was like super sad and depressed, and just going to work every day and interacting, that just drained me, and usually that energizes me. So I wasn't going to volleyball and I wasn't going to do my sports and socializing. It just felt like it was all too much. You just do the best that you can, but I had a really good friend who was expecting and we were on the same path. Her due date was close to mine, and one of the most supportive things she did was she came over on my due date and we made her birth announcements. So that doesn't maybe sound that great, but the fact that she was willing to acknowledge that she was having this joyful time while I was having this really difficult time, it was so powerful and so meaningful.
That's really nice, because I would assume for your friend it's really hard because there's a feeling of guilt, like, I'm sorry I have this baby, and it's so funny you bring that up. I can think of a person in my head right now. We were pregnant at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. And she lost her baby and I had mine. And still to this day, when my son is around her, I think of that. Yeah. Always. I think about, she must look at him and think.
And she probably does.
Would my baby would be that age.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What can we do? What can we do as a society? Like, I feel like, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but that old school way of thinking was like, oh yeah, well, you didn't even make it past 12 weeks, so you didn't really lose a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel like that?
I even felt like it coming to this interview, to be honest, right? Like we try not to do it, but the feelings are still there. So there are people who have had later losses or the death of a young child. But we don't experience each other's grief. I just know the grief that I have, and I know how it was very severe for me, and it was an early loss. So everyone's experience is unique, and we know what we do know, and we have to make our way through it.
How'd you get out of it?
Not really sure. I think time. I didn't run away from the feelings. I dealt with them. I saw a counselor in town. I went to a social worker that I was referred to through my family doctor, and that was very validating. She validated that my jealousy or my feelings were natural, and that I don't need to beat myself up about them as long as I'm not yelling at people on the street.
Mm-hmm.
That was really, really helpful.
Sometimes I want to yell at people on the street.
And just still connecting with friends. I had a really good network of friends. People who would bring over a meal or ask how you're doing and want the answer, not just, the passe, how are you? And yep, good, keep on walking. So
you have another child?
Yes, I have 2 children. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have 2 more?
Yeah.
So they came after?
Yes, I have 2 at home. It's a bit of a complex story there too. So my first marriage, that dissolved shortly after the loss, and with my new partner, we got pregnant really easily, and I have 2 children. What I did want to touch on was what you had kind of mentioned about feeling worried about losing a baby. Once you've had a loss, your mental health is a real struggle. So with my daughter Raina,
I love that name.
Thank you. I really did not bond with her when I was pregnant. I really tried hard not to bond with her.
Oh, wow.
I was very worried. I had a really big bleed at 12 weeks, and I thought that I was miscarrying. And I had really good care at that time. The next day, it was affirmed that she was okay, but I did bleed well into the 2nd trimester, which is not all of that typical.
Yeah.
And yeah, even with my subsequent pregnancy after that, I didn't feel quite so nervous, but it's kind of like you protect yourself. I'm not someone who gets crazy about babies, so I'm not the person who's fawning all over the baby when it comes into the office or anything, but if someone close to me has a baby, then I really care about that baby. So it's kind of a protection, a barrier that I've created maybe that helps me.
I can remember my one friend, she struggled greatly with infertility, ended up having babies, which is, I love that finale, but people would give her the most bizarre advice, and I know they were trying to be kind, and it came from a place of good intention, but I know she's like, I just want to punch them in the throat, and I'm like, and I think you don't know what you don't know.
That's
and
right.
It's like, oh well, it'll happen, you just gotta stop worrying about it.
Yeah, so general things are not to minimize what somebody else is going through by saying, oh, it was an early loss, or exactly, relax and you'll get pregnant.
Just relax.
Just don't minimize somebody else's pain or what they're going through. With people who have named a child, it can be really helpful for you to name that child when you're talking to them, write it in a card thinking of them, just like you would, my friend, anniversary of her father's death is coming up, and I will mention that to her, right? And you can do that with a child loss or a baby loss as well. Even acknowledging to your friends, like, I know you guys are still struggling to conceive, and we think about you. Like, that helps people so much to know that
simple
they're not alone.
Statement.
Yeah.
That's really simple.
Yeah.
You know what I think is interesting, Mary, is people sort of criticize where our society has gone in terms of everybody's offended and everybody's, we're too sensitive now. Yeah. And you know what, we are in a way, but I think what the pendulum has done is we are more self-aware and we're more mindful of what everyone's trying to go through. And I don't think that you have to be, you know, walking on eggshells all the time. I think that's really important about this. But I think it's just being mindful that, you know, you can't stop living your life. I'm not going to not talk about my children or however, but being mindful and respectful.
That's right.
Of somebody else who's not in that position that wants to be.
Yeah.
So, okay, so butterfly run. What's the premise with the butterfly? Why butterfly?
I think it's a common symbol that people associate with babies and children that have died. It's kind of a nice, beautiful symbol. See them in the spring and think maybe of your lost loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like it. No butterfly. And you have a kids run, a 1 kilometer run.
Yes. So we call it a memorial walk run, and anyone's welcome to do it.
Yeah.
Of course, it's very popular with kids. And the day of the race, we have a moment of silence just before the 1K. And the 1K brings everybody's energy back up. And then 20 minutes later, we do a warm-up, active warm-up with some loud tunes going. And
Tunes
then
are always the best.
And
Tune
then
makes
the 5K.
everything better.
Yeah.
I want to touch on our progress. Because I feel like I think back to our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers. And, you know, child mortality and mortality, like pregnancy, it was so much greater than what it is now. And we have come so far, and it's amazing. But so many of those grandmothers and great-grandmothers suffered in silence because that's just what you did. You lost a baby. And I can remember I did this beautiful interview with a woman, and she's, oh my gosh, now I think she's 98. Edith, I'm sorry if I've got your age wrong. And she had lost a son. And, you know, she's in a home, and she talks about that moment of losing her son. Like, she, you know, the grief. And I think there's so many people that actually have lost a child or miscarried or have struggled, and I think it's really valuable to bring it up. I know you lost a baby, you know, how are you doing? And I think we don't want to do that because it's like awkward.
And you don't want to make someone feel sad, but really you're showing them that you didn't forget and that you are thinking of them, and that's an incredibly loving thing to do. So that's another thing is it's not just the mums and it's not just the dads, and we probably don't talk about the dads enough, but it's also the sisters and the brothers and the aunts and the uncles. Grandparents are very unique because they're grieving double. They're grieving for their child's grief, and they're grieving for the loss of their grandchild.
Children are our whole purpose of society. They're our glue, right? They're like the foundation. They're the light. They're the life. So, yeah, great point, Mary. Well, I wanted to sing and dance. What are we going to sing and dance to?
Oh, we could do the Spin Doctors. I actually
know this?
That one.
Do you? I don't know if I know the words. Do you know them?
Really?
You know it?
Maybe.
Prove it.
I'm pretty sure I had this.
And well, let me see. Come on!
TransCanada Nissan, proud sponsor of MF's Drive-Bys, where satisfied customers are our best salespeople.